Hello. How are you guys doing? Hang on, let me light a candle. Set the vibe better. Okay, that's better. I hope you're all doing well. The sun is shining here in Copenhagen, and today we have a really fun little video. Another episode for my series, Interior Design Advice for My Subscribers, where you send me your spaces and I share my thoughts and hopefully provide some inspiration to improve the look and feel of your home. And today's space was sent in by a subscriber in Australia who built their house about 2 years ago. They chose these plans from like a model home that they went to go see, and they really loved their house, but once it was actually built and they moved in, they realized that they're struggling with the interior design a bit. They described their house as a cookie cutter house, and that's exactly why I'm really excited to talk about it, because this is a super common problem that I see in my consultations. So many of my clients that live in new build homes really struggle with the interior, which is interesting because you're designing within like a blank canvas, right? Which you think would be easy, but I think for a lot of people it just ends up feeling sort of intimidating. This subscriber feels like their space feels blank. They used the word dull to describe it, and they'd like it to feel more cozy, homey, and just to bring in some more personality. And I have a lot of ideas, so let's get into it. So my first sort of initial diagnosis of this space is that it feels pretty empty, both like physically and visually. A lot of elements are too small in scale for the size of this room. And on top of that, almost all of these pieces are so light in color that they're just totally getting lost. Like looking at these photos, I just know that it's so echoey in here. Do you know what I mean? With these tile floors and the tall ceilings, I think there's a lot of things that we can do to just sort of soften it and make it feel more comfortable. So overall concept, with each decision that we make, I think we need to keep this idea of filling up and softening the space at the front of our mind, because there's so much potential here for a more comfortable and pleasant space. I think we need to consider a slightly different space plan, as well as a more intentional use of color and contrast, and of course, probably bringing in as many soft textures as possible. They specifically mentioned in their email that they love their black and white kitchen, but that they also love wood furniture and they aren't sure how to blend these together, which I think goes hand in hand with these changes that we're gonna make. So first things first, let's start off with a clean slate so we can look at this room all cleared out. And I want to point out that for a sort of cookie cutter new build home, these stairs and railings are really pretty nice. I think this is kind of the exact language that we can pull from for the rest of the design. So first I want to talk about the layout and space plan, but honestly, before we get started, we need to speak about these window treatments. Blinds like these, roller blackout blinds, are so overused in my opinion. These are actually the exact same blinds that our landlords left us when we moved in. And I think like 99% of the time, they are the wrong choice for a room. The only time I could really understand using these is maybe in a home theater or a bedroom where it needs to be like pitch black with no light. And even then, I would first recommend getting some curtains that could do the same job. So really the only time is in a room that needs to be completely dark and the window is an unusual proportion that wouldn't work with curtains for some reason. And even then, I would probably layer it behind a Roman shade just to soften the look of it a bit and have the option for some diffused light. Like you don't have this binary choice of full light or no light, you know what I mean? And the reason I say this is because blackout roller blinds like this effectively cut the top off a window. They don't let any light through. And there's a reason that we don't put in windows with such low header heights in our homes, right? The proportion just feels strange, and when you have opaque blinds partially closed like this, it has the same uncomfortable effect, especially here because these two on the back wall are actually sliding glass doors that open to the garden. So if you have these blinds that are half closed, you end up with this sort of like limbo situation, right? You have to duck under the blinds. All of that is to say, these are basically never the right choice. So if you make one change to your home after this video, please let it be replacing these blinds with some semi-transparent curtains. These will emphasize the height of your ceiling, they'll let more light through, and letting the panels live beyond the actual window when they're open will sort of create this illusion that your windows are even bigger than they are. I think some black hardware could be nice just to tie in with your black window frames. And I think the curtains themselves are a nice opportunity to bring in just a slightly warmer tone than your walls. Still light, but something sort of creamy and something with a nice texture to it. In general, we want to bring in a lot of textures into this space to soften it up. Now, they wrote in their email that they're really struggling with this living room window because all you see outside of it is this really ugly fence. They said they had the idea of planting some climbing plants along the fence to beautify it a little bit, which is exactly what I think they should do. But if for some reason you can't do that, I think with the right curtains that let enough light through, you could totally just keep them closed all the time. Not all of us can control the view outside of our windows, so a really soft, beautiful curtain is a great solution sometimes. That being said, I think that usually works best in a room where there's another window or even a skylight that does let in direct sunlight, just so you don't feel too boxed in, you know? Okay, so now we have a much better base to work with. I think we can all agree that this is already looking way better, right? So many of you guys, my viewers, are creatives, whether you actually work in creative fields or just have an eye for design. Sometimes I forget that I don't need to over-explain or doubt that you guys will agree when something looks better. You guys are visual people and you get it. And that's why I think you guys will genuinely appreciate the sponsor of today's video, Framer. Framer is a new no-code website building tool that allows you to launch any website without needing a developer. But what makes it really unique is its approach to design. It's canvas-based, so it works just like other design tools that you're probably familiar with, but it has the power to output seriously nice websites. I feel like it's the perfect solution for those of us with small businesses or who want to put together an online portfolio, but we actually really care about how the website will look. Because if you've ever tried to just build your own website before, you know it's not long before you have to choose between either a highly constrained, limited website template or basically learning how to code. And let's be honest, most people like us don't have patience for either of those things. So enter Framer, which gives all the power to the designer. It handles everything technical, so you can focus on the design and the visuals. And I know what you're probably thinking, we're not developers, and this sounds really hard and time-consuming to learn, but that's exactly the point. Framer's interface is designed for people like us. It's super quick to get the hang of it. And for those of you who work with Figma, there's even a Figma to Framer plugin, which allows you to easily turn your Figma design into a real working website. You guys know that I have quite a few side projects on the back burner that I'm really excited to launch once they're ready, and they require websites. So I was super happy to learn about Framer. I was honestly a little skeptical at first that it would be any different from other web design tools, but after a few minutes of exploring the interface, I understood that it's genuinely something different and it opens up a world of website possibilities. You can use my link down in the description to learn more about Framer and sign up for free, and my promo code will give you 25% off your first 3 months with Framer. And thank you again to Framer for sponsoring today's video. All right, now let's get back to the home. Let's talk about how we can improve the layout. So they didn't actually send me a plan or any measurements, but I know that these floor tiles are likely 60 by 60 centimeters, and I can count. So I was able to draw up this very rough plan. And the biggest issue here, I would say, is the sectional sofa with a chaise. I've said it once and I'll say it again. L-shaped sofas like this are really best in a den or like a TV room because they really hamper conversation. Because everybody on the sofa is basically oriented in the same direction, which makes a lot of sense when you're watching TV, but not when you're like hanging out with people. And there's no TV in this room. So there ends up being a lot of pressure put on this armchair to like face everybody on the sofa and make this a social space. Especially here, there's no backrest on that end of the sofa. So by definition, nobody can sit there comfortably. It's basically just letting a footrest dictate the entire space plan. I also think the color and material of this sofa is not totally right for the space. The color is this sort of off-white with an almost greenish undertone that's creating a sort of dull, muddy look with all the other light tones in the room. And I also have a thing about leather sofas in rooms with tile or concrete floors. With floors like this, it's really important that our bigger pieces in the room will be soft and absorb as much sound as possible, you know? So I would instead look for a big, cozy sofa, maybe something roughly the width of this window behind it. And I would opt for like a mid-toned fabric upholstery, I think. Maybe something with like a little stripe or a check or just some sort of texture to it, like maybe corduroy or something. We're going for a very soft, tactile experience here. So the first priority is the curtains. The second priority is the sofa. And I would say that the third priority is the rug. The current rug is way too small and weak for this huge room. You can see how it's aligned with the bottom of the stairs with that last step, which is effectively implying that this is the edge of our living room, which, if my estimations are correct, that leaves us with well over 2 meters of just dead space, like empty tile floor. So rather than aligning with the bottom of the stairs here, I want us to include the entire sliding glass door as part of the living room. So the edge of the door should be roughly where the rug actually ends. Again, if my estimations are correct, I think a 3 meter by 4 meter rug should do a good job of this. And here I think is where the most intentional use of contrast should come in. I want this rug to be really dark. This is where we're going to balance out your black kitchen. I don't think the rug needs to be black, but something pretty dark and relatively desaturated should be nice. I want to be able to bring in a lot of warm tones with the furniture here, so something with a cooler undertone would free us up for that. Because if we were just to go with like a brown rug, for example, I think it would get too warm and too thick very quickly. And again, think about texture here. I would really recommend finding like a woven wool rug rather than something with that like industrial edge that you have on your current rug. Because again, remember with this cookie cutter white box that we're working in, every decision that we're making, we're hoping to make the space slightly more warm and soft and comfortable and just human. So little details like that really matter. Now, what I did like about the original sofa is that it was implying this orientation to the back garden. So I want to keep that with our new space plan. So I think we should put an armchair here with its back to the staircase. I think the armchair you already have will work well here, especially now that it'll have more contrast with the sofa and the rug. And I think we should pick up that same energy with a light colored coffee table. Now, I don't want this to be like too streamlined or harsh feeling, so I think a good option here would be to go with a stone table, like a light colored stone. Maybe something like travertine that's going to have some natural texture and softness within the material itself. And I know I've said this before, but having a really strong contrast between a rug and a coffee table in a living room is a really good way to get this very strong central focal point that can really ground all of the furniture around it. Now, opposite the sofa, I think we need something pretty substantial here. I would love to see 2 armchairs here, but I think something much more sturdy and chunky than the other armchair you have. Maybe this is a nice place to bring in some leather to work with our other upholstery materials. But I would look for something that's maybe even slightly darker than the sofa and has a warm undertone. If it's not clear, in my head, I'm basically plotting out all of our major pieces along like a value spectrum, like light to dark. And then with each additional piece that we're bringing in, I'm trying to fill in the gaps so that we get a really nice full spectrum of values. So chairs that are darker than the sofa but lighter than the rug, I think are what we're looking for here, which puts us at a value similar to that of the staircase, I would say, which we don't want to match too closely. I really love brown leather that's not too orange. Like whether it leans more red or more green, I think it brings such a nice subtle complexity when you pair those with wood tones that typically have a more orange or neutral undertone. And speaking of wood tones, with this stone coffee table and everything going on here, I definitely think we're missing some wood tones. So I would group these two leather chairs with a little light toned wood table just to really clearly sort of break them up. And the reason I'm saying we should go for a value on the darker end of our spectrum and not the lighter, I think is better understood from this view looking toward the dining room. We'll talk about the dining room in a minute, but I think we definitely want a really clear edge and sort of strong visual boundary between the living room and the dining room. And we can even stretch our wood tones a bit further with a stool at the other end of our conversation circle here. A seat here without a back, whether it's a bench or a stool, will keep this space plan feeling like it's really open and oriented to the garden, which I think is nice. And maybe this is an opportunity for a little bit of color or pattern in the upholstery. Again, I want it to be very different from the sofa, the leather chairs, and the armchair near the stairs. And to me, our sofa and white armchair are looking kind of naked without any side tables or lamps next to them. So I would get a very solid side table with some drawers next to the sofa here. Sometimes when you're looking for a piece next to a sofa, it's helpful to actually search for nightstands rather than side tables because they tend to feel more sturdy and usually offer more storage. And we'll put a nice little lamp on top of that. And then here with the armchair, we can put a more delicate little table. Maybe something made of metal could be nice. Almost all of our materials so far are pretty soft, which is super important for this space, but I think little moments like this are a nice place to bring in little touches of sort of harsher, harder materials without compromising on the coziness. And I like how that can sort of speak to the metal in the stair railing in a nice way. Now in the photos, in the existing design, they have a faux plant in the corner here. And they wrote in their email that they're sure I hate it, which I do, because I think faux plants are 100% of the time in poor taste. I've talked about this in many, many videos. I don't think there are any exceptions. And just to be clear, I don't think there's any shame in not being able to keep an indoor plant alive, although I do think it's easier than most people assume it is. Maybe that's a hot take, I don't know. I'm not like such a plant guy. You guys can go talk to Benji Plant about that. If you don't want to try to keep a real plant alive, I don't think there's any point in trying to fake it. It's like if somebody couldn't bake, but they wanted the look of fresh baked cookies in their kitchen, so they kept like plastic cookies on their countertop. It's very, very strange to me. Plants can definitely bring a really great feeling to a space, but not every space requires a plant. But more than that, this faux plant is way too small for this room. So I'm going to recommend that we let our greenery come from the outdoors here, maybe from those climbing plants that I hope you'll plant. And we won't have any plants, real or faux, in this room. That being said, I like the idea of having something with some height in this corner here to sort of balance out the stair landing on the other side. So I think a big floor lamp, probably with like a large shade, something that will bring our eyes up, is the perfect answer for this empty corner here. So now in addition to these two lamps that are sort of flanking the sofa, I think we should bring in another floor lamp next to these leather armchairs, but I think this one should have a much slimmer silhouette and give off a more like directional light, like sort of a reading light, rather than like a glow of a lampshade. Do you know what I mean? These chairs are already establishing such a sturdy, border to the living room with like their color and materiality and size. I don't think we need to overdo it and also have a super substantial lamp here. And now we have some lovely lamps all around the perimeter of our seating area, which is a really nice way to define a zone in an open space like this. Now, getting into the details, the styling of the space, I can tell from your existing coffee table that you have some items that would probably look really nice out on the coffee table, some books and boxes and things like that. And because of these massive windows, there aren't really many opportunities for art here. If you do want to hang something on that back wall behind the stairs, I would center it under the portion that has a ceiling. In their email, they mentioned that they'd like to incorporate a touch of their Filipino heritage in their space. So I went to Etsy and I've found this very cool hand-woven basket from the Philippines. Sometimes when you have walls that are an unusual shape like this, it's sort of like a triangle or a pentagon, I don't know, because of the angle of the stairs there. I think it's nice to hang pieces that aren't just totally rectangular, like your classic picture frame. I don't know why, but I just think it looks nicer against unusually shaped negative space like this. Okay, now on to the dining room. Let's first clear out the space and give this back sliding door the same treatment with our new curtains. Now, before we talk about the dining table itself, I want to talk about this back wall with the sideboard and window above it. This sideboard is the exact same width as the window, which is something I usually try to avoid. Typically, with a composition on a wall like this, whether it's a piece of art or a TV or a window, we generally want it to be smaller, like 2/3-ish the width of the piece of furniture below it, just because it tends to feel a bit more balanced. But I do think there's some flexibility there. Not so much with TVs, because TVs are so dark and visually dominant. If the console that you have under a TV is perfectly aligned with it, I think it just looks really wrong and really top heavy. But here, because the window is so light, it's not totally bothering me that these are the same width. So I think we can keep this sideboard here. We just need to make some moves to keep the window feeling light and keep the sideboard feeling very solid. So as far as the window treatments go, because this window has such a high sill height, I wouldn't use curtains here, but rather some Roman shades. And I think they should be white and let through lots and lots of light. But let's put a pin in this and come back to talk about styling the sideboard a bit later. Because first I want to talk about the dining table itself. Now, I really like your dining table with its wire legs, as well as your Eames fiberglass chairs. I think both of these designs are really nice on their own, but I don't think they work well together. All of these legs together just create an absolute visual mess that feels really stressful. And they also feel so fine and delicate over this tile floor. It's not really helping our mission of filling up the space and bringing a nice, solid, cozy presence to the interior. So I think you can totally keep this table, but I would consider getting some visually stronger dining chairs. Honestly, either a very dark wood tone or maybe even black could be nice. Again, we want to pull that strong contrast out of the kitchen and run it through the entire space. Basically what we did with the rug in the living room. And I would make sure that these chairs have pretty substantial legs, just for some visual weight coming all the way down to the floor. And if you want to go above and beyond with the depth in this space, you could consider getting some contrasting chairs at the heads of your table. Maybe something a bit more special and unique with multiple materials to sort of stretch our material palette even further. Now back to the sideboard. Do you see how all of the pieces here are just really sort of small and timid? We want it to feel really strong and anchored under the window there, so I would recommend styling it with some more substantial pieces. Maybe this is a nice place to bring in some more art from your heritage. Along with that, I would love to see a big table lamp here, because other than the fixture over the island, it looks like we're missing some sort of soft lighting on this end of the room. Now, I think it's super nice to display family photos and personal elements in a home, but I don't think we need to let that limit our creativity or how we consider compositions. So I think it would be nice to hang this photo between the two curtains here in the space that's sort of dividing our two zones. And in a way, it sort of punctuates like the end of the hallway, right? So I think it's nice to have something there. But rather than just having a basic frame and calling it a day, maybe we can get a little bit creative with how we display this photo. I like to think of family photos and sentimental things in a home as almost like an archive rather than art. And I think that sort of inspires a different approach to framing. Maybe you could create a nice composition with some other photos or items that mean a lot to you and your family, and putting them together in one frame really helps them feel like more of an interesting feature. And this also allows you to arrange them vertically, which will much better suit this wall between the two curtains. This is just an idea. Maybe you actually use multiple frames instead. But when it comes to framing personal items, I really think there's so much room for creativity. And as far as styling the dining table goes, I think it could be nice to have a nice ceramic piece or something similar in the center of the table. If it's a little pot or vase or something, you could fill it with some branches to bring in some more height and just a stronger focus. And that sort of brings the vibe of an indoor plant without actually having to have an indoor plant, right? And there's a bit of an issue with lighting here. I think because of the fixture over your island, I wouldn't recommend getting another pendant here, but maybe a nice flush mount or semi-flush mount fixture over the dining table could feel like it makes more sense than the current ceiling plan. But we definitely need some more intentional lighting on the dining table here. So a flush mount or semi-flush mount fixture won't really give you that sort of nice soft lighting for dining in the evening. So you could consider getting some nicely designed portable table lamps. Those will give like a nice soft restaurant quality glow to your table in the evening. That or candles, of course, always work well. And finally, in the kitchen, I honestly think this is a really nicely designed kitchen and doesn't need many changes. I think the contrast will feel a lot less harsh now with the changes we've made. If you're open to it, I might just consider bringing in a runner to introduce some midtones and pattern and texture and warmth, just so the kitchen will relate better to the new living room and dining room. I think that will bring a lot of balance to the whole space. And I think those are all the changes I would consider. I'll put in like a little before and after moment now so we can see all the changes together. I think this is a good lesson in using contrast intentionally. Hopefully you guys can see and agree that pulling the contrast out of the kitchen and running it through the whole space has a really significant impact on the feeling of this space. Before, we had a very light, almost washed out living space with basically no dark tones, right? I think it felt very out of sync with the kitchen. And now it feels a lot more cohesive and balanced. Also, I think the space plan is really key. Having a layout that really meets the scale of the house is such a game changer. But yeah, I hope this was interesting and a fun watch. Maybe it sparked some inspiration for those of you that live in cookie cutter homes yourself and feel intimidated by that big white box. I feel like curtains in situations like this make such a huge difference. If any of you watching have those blackout roller shades in your home, especially in front of a door, go change them out immediately, please. If you don't, I'll find you and send you to interior design jail. Okay, thank you so much for watching, and if you found this to be a fun watch, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel. And if you want to submit your space to this series, it's an ongoing series. I don't know if and when I'll ever stop. Please feel free to send horizontal photos along with a floor plan to noahdanielstudio@gmail.com. And for those of you who would like my advice on your space, but you either don't want to wait for my next advice video or maybe you don't love the idea of your home being publicly spoken about on YouTube, I do offer 1-hour design consultations over video. So you can email me for more details about that. I always need to shamelessly plug my consultations at the end of these videos. Yeah, this was fun. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in a couple weeks. Bye.